Folks, in this module, we're going to have a look at anaphylaxis, aka a severe allergic reaction. Now, as we all know, there is a humongous list that's growing on a daily basis of things that people are allergic to. Shellfish, nuts, bites, stings, the list goes on and on. Many of us have very, very minor allergies. This may be to a dog or a cat or a food or something that we may come into contact with. What the body naturally does when it comes into contact with something that we are allergic to, it releases a small amount of histamine. It's a natural hormone. Now, we can usually counteract this by taking something like a Piriton or an antihistamine tablet so we can control the level of histamine when it's released. When somebody has a severe allergy, aka they are anaphylactic, the body releases bucket loads of histamine. It very quickly floods the body with histamine. Some of the outward signs and symptoms of somebody going into anaphylactic shock are swollen lips, swollen airway, puffy cheeks, puffy eyes, red blotchy rashes, irritated skin, but most worryingly, struggling to breathe. Now, very first thing to do is relax, don't panic. Okay, if you have a casualty who's struggling to breathe, me saying just breathe doesn't really help the situation. I want to try to relax. I want to try to help them gently and calmly onto the floor, but I want to keep them upright. Try never to lay them flat on their back because gravity is just going to be a slightly extra labouring crushing force on that airway. Now, if there is a casualty who's struggling to breathe, you'll find that they'll naturally get themselves into a position that's comfortable for them. So don't fight them into the seated position, but we just want to make sure that they're not flat on the floor. Consider taking off a tie, undoing a top button or two, taking off a bag, just de-restricting the airway and the chest area as much as possible. And I want to try to advise long, slow, deep breaths, just to try to keep the oxygen intake as undisturbed as possible. At the earliest available opportunity, I want somebody to phone 999 as soon as I realise what may have happened, and certainly that they're struggling to get their air in. I need an ambulance to come. Now, what I want to try to do is source this person's auto-adrenaline injector, or Epipen. Now, the reason the emphasis isn't too much on this is A, and 1, this may be the first attack that they've had, so they wouldn't carry one. B, and 2, they may not have been aware that they're allergic to something, so they wouldn't necessarily have the pen. Or C, and 3, they may not have had an episode in years and so have stopped carrying it. So I want to reassure the casualty, get them in a position, control the breathing, and get an ambulance running. If I can source the EpiPen, that's the bonus. This may be carried by the casualty themselves. They may be able to administer it themselves. It may have already been administered by somebody with the casualty, but as a first aider, it's possible it would fall down to us to administer. Now, your EpiPen, one end of the pen comes off, one does not. The end that comes off is the bit that faces towards the sky. Never administer an EpiPen with your thumb over the top, just in case you inadvertently manage to turn it around when you administer it. Of course, you're going to receive the shot of adrenaline. Just hold it around the shaft. We don't need to put the thumb over the top. When we take the top off, it loads the cartridge into place. All we need to do in a large fleshy area of the casualty, which is the outer thigh, with the weight of your hand, that's just going to drop into the thigh. It's a very high-powered, spring-loaded needle. We're going to hold that in place for around 10 seconds to allow the small adrenaline cartridge to empty into the bloodstream. I then remove it, and the cap from the pen is going to safely drop down over the needle. I'm going to massage the area for about 10 seconds just to speed up the absorption process and provide a little bit of comfort. Now, this EpiPen remains the property of the casualty. It's going to go with them to the hospital, and of course, I'm going to update the operator with the fact that I have administered a dose of adrenaline.